listening to the Sportageous podcast, where sport gets smarter.
Hello and welcome to the Sportageous podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Ismail Saeed. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You, of course, are an architect by day and a cyclist by morning, day and night. Is that the right description?
Maybe by early morning, if I go for training in the early morning, or by evening if it's after work.
So, how about you tell me a bit about, how you got into cycling? What got you to start cycling? Because you obviously do it at a serious elite sort of level.
Yeah, true. No, I have an interesting story. Ever since a very young age, like my earliest memories are pushing my tricycle, riding my tricycle, then riding my bike with the trainers on it, then off them, up and down the house, up and down the veranda, where we used to live in Boyne Island, Tannum Sands, and in Australia.
Yep.
And I'd be just cycling up and down every little stretch of park my mum would take me, any green strip I'd be in. And my family shifted to Pakistan, where I'm partly from. And over there, I grew up in the foothills of the Himalayas. Yeah, and I was just riding just outside of the capital in Islamabad.
Uh-huh.
And one fine day, my mum's like, "We got to get you into a race because you were riding so much. You could do some good in a race."
Mm-hmm.
So, lo and behold, she took me to this sports complex in Islamabad.
Yep.
And she just walked into the offices of the Pakistan Sports Board and said, "Look, I have a son here who's mad, crazy cyclist.
Yep.
Let's get him in a race. Can you direct me to where there might be a Pakistan cycling body?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, true. We can do that for you for sure. But you know what? We're sponsoring a race in the Himalayas called the Tour of the Karakorums. We need to put your son in that. We will sponsor him. We'll give him a shirt. He needs to rock up there with his bike on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. There are 12 teams from all over the world coming, best mountain bikers in the world, and he'll be rubbing shoulders with them, and he will be in the race with them."
Yep.
And I'm thinking, whoa. What are these guys talking about? This for real? Mountain biking in Pakistan with foreigners? I've never heard of any of the three things in this country, let alone like me going there. Like, dude, serious? For real?
How long ago was this?
2006. I was 16 years old. This office was held by a retired military general, and he was a pretty decent figure. And as we were there in his office with my mum, I was thinking, what is mum doing? Walking into some random general's office, ex-general's office. And after we heard this, offer he made, I very timidly, just as we were leaving, said, I do have a friend who I ride with. His name is Abdullah Aslam, and we ride together like all the time. He's almost as good as me. He would love to come. It would be the dream of his lifetime if he could come. He's like, yeah, beta, aap usko bhi bhej do. Yes, please, we will send him too, no problem. I think we know we're on a bus with all these guys in a caravan, and me and Abdullah looking at each other thinking, okay, the best we get from this is we're turned back from there and we get these free shirts that we're wearing, and we'd be happy.
Yeah.
What actually happened at the race there was I finished pretty decent. I finished not the last, and on a bike which weighed like 3 times the weight of these cyclists, ahead of some of the ones who weren't that great, but they were seasoned pros nonetheless, and they were so impressed with my and Abdullah's riding, they gave us their jerseys. Wow. They signed them for us. Some of them were, one of them was the number 2 World Cup winner in mountain biking in the world at the time. There were cyclists from Germany, England, Austria, Netherlands. Like, it was insane. And it gave us the inspiration to come back next year, train for it, beat the whole Pakistani field, which was there, and I 15th overall, 5th on one of the stages as a 17-year-old with a bit of training. And that catapulted me into cycling, and I devoted myself to cycling like a religion, hey. So I took a gap year from high school, and then I started racing in Pakistan as a semi-pro, first with a provincial team, the Punjab cycling team, then with the Pakistan Army cycling team who picked me up, which was a pro team, one of the best teams, and did the hard yards.
Yeah, that's quite the story. And of course, you live in Brisbane, Australia, where you also cycle. So
Yeah.
I guess tell me a bit about the forms of cycling. There's obviously the long distance tours that people do. There's also cycling in the velodrome, as you mentioned, mountain biking. What do you do? And what are the main ones that are out there?
Yeah, well, the disciplines I do, I'm a pretty good all-rounder. I started mountain biking, then because in Pakistan there was only like one mountain bike race a year, and most of the cycling there was road racing. I did road racing, which is what you see in the Tour de France. We did what's called the Tour de Pakistan, Asia's longest cycle race, 1,700 kilometers from Karachi to Peshawar across the length of the country with participating. That was at 18 years of age, actually, my 18th birthday. That was a pretty epic race. That also was a defining point in my career where thereafter I just soared, and the exposure and experience I had, along with all the other Pakistani cyclists who have very limited exposure, were catapulted into another category of cyclists.
Which ones have you competed in, and which ones are perhaps the most popular?
Yeah, well, I started off mountain biking, and because in Pakistan we had a lot more experience in road racing, thanks to the races that we had there, I became a professional road racer. And coming to Australia, I continued doing that, a bit of mountain biking on the side, and also had a dabble in track, which I then took up a lot more seriously later in life. And now I primarily race track in the velodrome, which is what you see in the Olympics, going round and round in that big bowl, and road racing.
What is the key difference between the different disciplines? Race that you do in the velodrome has a very different format to that of which you do on a large course.
Well, the major differences between mountain biking, track cycling, and road cycling are the three disciplines use very high level base fitness, cardiovascular fitness, no doubt. But in track races, your events vary from short 10-second sprints to longer, maybe even up to 1 hour long races. The key thing is in track racing is sprinting, power, speed, top speed, tactics, whereas in road cycling, it's a lot more endurance based. Huge amount of endurance based. It's a race of attrition. Whoever can conserve most energy, most smartly, most widely, not necessarily the most powerful cyclist, as in the track. If you do cross-discipline sport within cycling, it helps your performance a lot in any one discipline you follow. Mountain biking is a lot more about skills,
right? And
once again about climbing power, about endurance, but much less about sprinting and pure power generation than, say, track cycling. Everyone has a variety of skills they can choose from and apply to any one cycling discipline they choose.
Okay, so it is possible for cyclists who focuses on one of the disciplines to transition over to the other.
Definitely.
Right.
It's very easy to do that and very beneficial, especially if you do it in your off-season. Come back to your traditional discipline with a bit more, with that to complement it.
And obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd assume that the level of competitive cycling in Australia is very high, but what sort of races do they have in Pakistan? And
yes.
How are the athletes there?
Well, to be honest, the athletes in Pakistan are pretty solid blokes. They're pretty hardcore for what they do, and with the limited exposure they have, they are very, very talented. But unfortunately, in cycling, you can only get so far without throwing yourself down the deep end with the top boys. And in Australia, I'm racing with Tour De France pros in their off season here in Brisbane, and the level of cycling is so ridiculously high. Everyone is just flying neck and neck ahead of each other. In Pakistan, it's a very mixed bag. You got to rock up to a start line, and there's like next level pros, maybe 10 of them, then a wide from semi-pros to very strong novices.
Yeah.
Which means people finish up to an hour late at the finish line. So you got all sorts, and it makes for very interesting racing. Well, front, yeah.
I bet. What has been your What has been the highlight of your career?
The highlight of my career would probably be the Murray race win and record I held in Pakistan, which is one of the toughest races of the year.
Right.
Climbs 4,500 feet in the last 30 kilometers of the race at a 6% grade. It was set on a new route, which I held the record. I trained really hard for it here in Australia, then went over, trained with my team a little bit there. I did an altitude training camp in the Himalayas and clinched it for the team, the Pakistani team at the time. And that was sensational. That was amazing. And had done the Tour De Pakistan before, finished 14th. And to win this was just exceptional. And to this day, like, people remember me for that. Also for the successive second, thirds, and fourths over the next 4 years that followed in the subsequent editions of the same race, and also the Nathia Gali, the Aptabad to Nathia Gali race, which was even tougher.
Right.
Me and another cyclist, Nisar Ahmed from the Pakistan WAPTA team, had neck and neck fights, which the whole of Pakistan would see on their televisions in the news, and it was just sensational. Even now when we shake hands, we have goosebumps just remembering those times. Pretty epic. Those memories are amazing.
And speaking of Pakistan and races in Pakistan, there is this new race which has just started, I guess, over the last couple of years, considered the most dangerous race, the highest elevated race in arguably the world, the Tour De Khunjareb. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Now, look, the highest stage of the Tour de France is at about 2,800 meters above sea level, starting higher than that and finishing at 4,800 meters above sea level. Wow. So it takes you to a terrain into a part that is completely otherworldly. And the stress on your body due to lack of oxygen, particularly on the last stage, where you have an 80-kilometer run up to 4,800 meters with no single flat section or descent or letting up in any sort of way, takes you right over the limit for any cyclist. If you're not ending up with hypothermia, even if you have the most acclimatized, the lack of oxygen in your legs, you will start panting. You will push, you'll try to get up and sprint if someone is overtaking you, and you will black out and faint if you don't sit down and start breathing hard again. It's a very unusual sort of race to be in.
Right. I was reading that I think the final stretch or the final stage actually has at least a 20% gradient throughout. Is that really the case?
It has it in sections. And those sections are at some of the highest points of the race where you're already dying. Your legs are burning with fire from climbing so far, so long, especially over the cumulative stages of the tour, with the fatigue going through your system. It is very hard to get past those grades, and often a lot of people are walking up it and then trying to hop back on their bikes to get to the finish. It's a real race of attrition and endurance.
Wow. So when is the, I guess, next edition of the race?
Well, as of last year, it is an annual event.
Wow.
Last year we had about 60 riders. This year we had about 90 cyclists, including teams from Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Switzerland, and a few other countries, which was really good to see. Numbers pick up, especially internationally. And they will have the following again next year. It has been an incredible success, partly thanks to the pure enthusiasm of the Pakistani cyclists, who, with such limited exposure, are just such hardcore cycling fanatics. I wonder how in a country like Pakistan, but I have my man, they look at YouTube, look at how Mark Cavendish sprints at the Tour de France, and try to imitate that and try to practice it between each other. Yeah. And that is literally, I can tell you, that's one of the reasons why their sprinting skills are improving. Right. In addition to that, we've got some really good direction and work being done by some guys in the Pakistan Cycling Federation. Yep. And we've got a chief minister, previous chief minister of Gilgit-Baltistan, the province where this race was set, was very keen to provide a soft image of the northern areas of Pakistan, boost the tourism, get an event going, particularly this one when he heard this idea, he completely lashed onto it and fully sponsored it. Got the whole province, all the bureaucracy, all the military, the police and forces in the area support the race.
Wow.
Assist in logistics, which is way more than the race itself for organising it, and made it an incredible success, which we hope will continue.
That is great to hear. Seeing sport on that side of the world is really something. I guess you touched on Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Switzerland, a couple of other countries visiting.
Yep.
As an Australian with Pakistani heritage, I have to ask, do you think we'll be seeing Australian cyclists there soon?
Oh, definitely. Next year I'm taking an Australian team. I've been tasked with bringing an Australian team with me, which the race organisers have advised may be partially sponsored as well by them, in manner of transport, accommodation and logistics. And my mates are very keen to come, some of the top blokes here in Brisbane, so I'm very hopeful we get an Australian team coming, and you might be talking with them around this time next year.
Yeah, that would only happen if, you do connect me to them.
For sure. Well, we'll keep in touch,
Absolutely. So tell me this. With this race, the winner this year was a cyclist from Balochistan, I believe, Najibullah. So to win a race like that, you obviously know the guy?
Yeah. I'll tell you something. It's interesting. So this guy is from a small village in Balochistan, and the Balochistan cycling team is one of the strongest cycling teams in the country.
Right.
Up to about 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. It was one of the worst.
Wow.
Even in the Pakistan WAPDA team and the Sui Southern Gas Company cycling team, which sponsors me as well when I race there, some of their strongest riders are from Balochistan, and they pretty much train together. Now, I chatted with them at the last tour. I was like, what's going on here? You guys, like, son of guns, like, how are you getting these performances and making these times? Like, your junior guys seem even faster than you senior blokes who've been racing 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's only getting better. They're just getting faster and stronger than even potentially I and Nisar were at our height when we were racing neck and neck at Murray and Nothing Gully. And they tell me it's the thin air. And I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. That's really paying off. So that altitude training in Balochistan is paying off. That clean, thin, dry air at a height, at an elevation, paying off. Plus, I'm like, hey, that's just on its own not enough. What else? He's like, oh, well, we've got good bikes now, and we've got the internet, social media, and these guys are connecting with cyclists overseas, making friends with them, getting tips, getting free stuff, getting exposure.
Wow. Yep.
They're doing everything because they are hardcore fans and they live for this stuff. They don't have necessarily much in their lives to live by, and they're not don't often have the best means to even support themselves, but they will get expensive bikes somehow and they will be racing them neck and neck, and that's what they live for, to wake up in the mornings at Fajr, at dawn, and they'll pray in the morning together maybe sometimes, and then they'll go and train and then go to their carpentry shop or whatever their day job is.
That is inspiring, if nothing else.
Yeah, and this is with very little to no government funding, infrastructure. The Balochistan Cycling Federation doesn't, to be honest, seem to be doing much, if I may say so. It's just the pure talent and the passion of these boys. And they're getting better and better.
Yeah, wow. And which region of Pakistan do you see growing the most, or which team perhaps participating from across the provinces has the most up-and-coming cyclists, or is it just across the whole country?
It's not across the whole country. Definitely Balochistan. Also, very recently, KPK, which is also really good to see because the KPK team used to be the absolute worst team, and now they've got the Pakistan national time trial champion. He's been overseas on a few of the tours, like I think the World Cup and so on, South Asia Games, etc.
Sure.
In addition to that, Pakistan WAPDA team, Pakistan Army team, Sui Southern Gas Company team, these three teams have been absolutely neck and neck forever. So nothing's changed there, but then fighting for every point they can in every race. But a new, really good thing to see is Team Pakistan come up out of nowhere from Karachi, largely thanks to Critical Mass, which is a cycling club based in each of the big cities in Pakistan, Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad. And they have riders who are from the elite or upper middle class of Pakistan, more often than not, mixed together, which isn't that common to see in a country like that. And they are training hard as these guys who have nothing much to live by, and this is their life. And these guys have an option to just live the high life nice and easy in their cushy houses, but no, they get out, train dirty roads day in, day out, form a team, sponsor part of the race, and interact with these locals they wouldn't interact with otherwise, actually get some results. Yeah. Which is awesome to see in a country like Pakistan. In Australia, we have a coffee culture with cyclists. Over there in Pakistan, they have a chai culture. They'll have chai after the race.
Well, of course, in Pakistan, they love their tea, don't they?
Yeah. So it's really cool to see that.
And obviously, it's authentic chai, not a chai latte.
Yep. Yes. That's true.
And aside from, I guess, coming back to that question of taking an Australian team, do you see any other teams from other parts of the world coming to compete?
Yeah. Do.
Is there interest?
There is interest. I think the race organisers could do a lot better with marketing the race overseas. Plus, they really need to fix the dates. They don't tend to fix the dates till like a month before the competition, which is way too late for people coming from overseas and from Western countries who normally lock in those sorts of leaves and holidays and tours months beforehand, if not more than that. So if they get their act together on that part, there can be, and there hopefully will be, a lot more teams coming from overseas. I would like to see an Indian team because we keep going there for events in India, and where I would like to say, are more often than not beating them black and blue. Bangladesh team is really good; they could come. Sri Lankan team has been one of the best teams in terms of coming. They come all the time at the slightest invitation. Afghanistan team rocks up like it's one of our own provincial teams, which is also cool to see. But we need more teams coming from Iran. Now, Iran has one of the best Asian cycling teams in the world, and we wonder how. And it must be something like the analogy with the Balochi boys. But I do believe they have very good funding from what's called the Tabriz Petrochemical team, and good coaching and stuff like that. It's a bit Soviet style, like, very hardcore, rigorous training, bit old school tactics, but it seems to do them well for endurance training and road racing.
They seem to be quite successful across a lot of sports, Iran in particular, and Asia. Tell me a bit more about the stages of the Tour De Khunjareb and the locations, perhaps, because I do know that the race ends at the world's highest border in terms of elevation, which is the border between Pakistan and China. Tell me a bit more about that.
The Khunjerab Pass. That is the final culminating finishing point of the race, and it could not be more befitting for such a race in the world. The highest metal road in the world, the highest border in the world, the border of two such great countries, China and Pakistan. It has, since this road was built in the 60s, been one of the greatest road trips to do for not just cyclists, but bike cyclists, and people who journey by car. It has been well documented, especially when Pakistan used to have a lot more tourism earlier in the day, as one of the most beautiful and incredible drives and trips one could do. So to ride that route on these bikes in that terrain is exceptional. We started from Gilgit, which is the capital of the Gilgit-Baltistan province in the north. It winds its way out of Gilgit along the mighty Indus River, and you go towards Hunza. You pass right through Karimabad, you pass right through a number of towns, Aliabad, and so on, which are just so beautiful to look at. it's just a shame that as cyclists we can't really appreciate the beauty as much as the people in our coaches and team vehicles at the back. You go through a range of tunnels, sometimes up to several kilometers long. Beautiful tunnels, well lit on the inside and very well made by China as part of their CPEC route, where they've invested a lot in this infrastructure. And you also pass by beautiful, pristine blue waters of lakes. Beside you, glaciers to your right. Sometimes your road is covered with glacial snowmelt. You have to be very careful you don't slip off.
Yeah, of course.
I remember day 2 of the stage, we woke up in tents to view what we saw, a glacier in front of us, which we couldn't see the night before when we arrived.
Oh, wow.
The organisation normally put us up in hotels along the way, but in this one instance, they they set up a tent village where they hosted, lunch, post-race lunch, snacks, and dinner. They had presented local dancing, and there was like a cultural evening, and all manner of festivities going on as part of the tour, which was like half the fun of the tour, actually, especially if you're there as an amateur or as a tourist rider. And for the families and the friends and the supporters following, which there were a lot of as well, it was they were enthralled by the whole tour. All along the way, we had children from schools, Boy Scouts, girls, guys in colleges coming out, clapping, cheering us on the way, throwing roses, confetti, playing songs, doing dances in front of us as we passed. It was legit like a Pakistani version of the Tour de France. It was no different. And the enthusiasm and the fervor of the people, the locals in the area who had nothing to do with cycling and probably haven't ridden a bike in their lives, incredible. We were blown away by it. That was so good for the junior Pakistan cyclists who were there, who now have so much more encouragement in them to now come back next year for the race and beat their mates at it and get onto a pro team,
Yeah. And of course, the culture in that part of the country is so rich and vibrant, colorful. It must have really, really been a treat, hey?
Very rich indeed. And as a Pakistani, going to that region of the country was literally like going to another country because the culture is so different and because Pakistan has such richness in culture and traditions from one place to the other, particularly in that part of the northern areas. So, yeah, it was fascinating. And then I noticed something like as we reached towards the end of our tour, you could actually see the culture as the landscape changed and became harsher. It almost felt like the people became softer and more welcoming and more hospitable, as you find in other parts of Pakistan.
I guess being able to observe that while competing in the race is something in itself.
Oh, yeah, well, that's after the race when you're mingling with the locals.
Right. I'll let you be humble on that one. Okay, let's take it back to your journey as a cyclist. I'm always baffled by this. How exactly do you manage everything that you do? So, you have a normal life, you work a normal 8, 9, 10-hour job, you run a business, and you cycle. What enables you to do that and be able to compete at the same time at such a significantly high level?
I think there's nothing but the burning flame of passion within. Just can't let it go. Just addicted to it, addicted to the game, hey. And when I don't feel it, I feel depressed. Right. And when I do it, I feel like I have reached my true potential when I'm in good form. So that keeps me going. And it's all about time management, to be honest. You have to have the passion, obviously. Sure. And with that, you find ways of fitting it in, of making it happen, of finding ways to do that training. For me, the hardest part of competing and racing is not the race, is not the training. It's actually just getting to the training sessions and doing it, time management. Because I know if I have time, I will get the results. If I'm doing the hard yards, I'll get there. No issue. MashaAllah, I'm gifted that way, I would like to say. But That time management is so hard sometimes. You just have to get on top and make it a priority, just like you would with work or any other commitments which you make unavoidable. Your daily, weekly, and yearly cycle revolves around your training sessions, when your races are. I mean, if on Tuesdays you're going to be going to the velodrome at night, well, you're going to stay at work till late, go directly to the velodrome. On Thursday mornings, you'll wake up super early for your training session, and that might help you get to work a bit earlier than you normally would anyway. You prepare a schedule for yourself, a plan with yourself and your coach, and you stick to it. And consistency, more often than not, is the main thing which gets you results.
Since we are, sitting in Australia, how different is racing here than in Pakistan, and what's the culture like?
Oh, it's very different. Here we are very blessed. We have some of the best competition in the world, and we have very good exposure, racing year-round, and lots of races. So skills-wise, we've got it all. It makes for very tight, very hard racing, neck and neck. It's very hard to get away from the pack. It's very hard to make big moves and changes. It's very hard to race aggressively because everyone's going to chase you down. The terrain has a lot to do with racing and cycling. Unfortunately, we don't have the big mountains here like we have in Pakistan, which is where some people come into their element, riders such as myself. And I really miss that. So when I go back there, I feel like I come into my own and I'm attacking in the mountains and I'm going for it. I'm not looking back. Here, if I attack, I have to look around, I have to see what's happening, I have to be so tactical. In Pakistan, a rider who's a good climber can really soar.
Sure.
Unfortunately, tactics are poor, performance levels are poorer as well. So when it comes to sprinting, flat races, you have some really good sprinters there, but they're not very organised. Teams not organised. Coaching is a bit old school. So you can see a lot of improvements can be done. Things are a bit ad hoc, haphazard. You'll find like cyclists drinking water from their bottles in the middle of the race when they absolutely should not be. There's a lot more crashes there than there should be. And that comes down to lack of skills and exposure and racing at high speed all the time and getting used to it. Motor skills, all that sort of stuff.
And here's the big question. So you'll be competing at the Tour De Khunjareb next year. Australia or Pakistan?
Look, if it ever came down to representing a national team at the Olympics or the World Cup, I would represent Pakistan any day.
Right.
But for the purposes of this tour, it would be Australia to get an Aussie team going.
Right.
And to be proud of green and gold,
And have you had any other involvement with the race and its development and so on?
I have made some suggestions to the race organizer, my good friend Abdullah Aslam, who I talked about earlier, and they have taken some of them on board. So hopefully more of them will be taken on board next year, because I tell them some tips from what we do in racing here in Australia and how it can be organised a bit better. But they do the best they can.
And you mentioned your mate Abdullah. I believe he actually sells or has a business around cycling in Pakistan.
Yep, that's right. When we did that tour of the Himalayas when we were 16, 17 years old, the first one, that completely changed our lives forever. It's like we adopted a new religion called cycling. And from then onwards, we came back to school. We were still in high school, and we came back thinking, what are these small lives these people are living, stressing about exams and assignments when there's so much bigger stuff in the world? These guys have no idea. So, like, in one way or another, we just, cycling became so inherent to our lives that even though Abdullah sort of didn't, as of the last few years, continue with professional cycling, he is now a professional in selling bikes, racing bikes and equipment, mountaineering gear, and is very much in touch with the cycling community and part of the organising committee on races.
Sure.
And he finds great pleasure in doing that. Often not for a salary or for money. It's voluntary work, but it keeps us ticking, If you can find something, a talent in life, and if you can give it your best and find your true potential, that's that's the meaning of life.
Oh,
For me.
absolutely. And I find it really interesting how, you both started together and you're still involved in the sport, but such different aspects of it. So tell me, what is his, say, we have one of our listeners who perhaps in Pakistan actually wants to purchase something from him. How do they get in touch?
Oh, well, they have a Facebook page called Exo Outdoors. They have a shop in Islamabad, in Shakarpania. They also have a shop in Defence in Rawalpindi, and they're planning to open one up in Lahore very soon. So they're expanding. They have a lot of clientele now who buys racing equipment for them, who then use them in races. A lot of people buy them for leisure, and he's making he's bringing his dreams to life.
That is absolutely awesome. Look, Ismail, I won't take up much more of your time because it is pretty late here in Australia. But to finish things off, I wanted to ask you, what would you say to young kids who want to take up the sport, who are interested in it, particularly in Pakistan, but also here in Australia? And essentially, what advice would you give them?
The advice I would give them is to push through and attack when it's hardest, because that's when everyone gets left behind. And also to always wear a helmet when cycling and be the safest they possibly can, because we're plagued with being hit by cars, unfortunately. The only downside of us.
I know, I live in Canberra, so that happens quite a bit.
Yeah,
Giving them the safety and then on the other side, the determination. That's the key.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the key to any discipline of cycling. Pain. They have to love the pain. They have to love that pain. They have to be a nutcase to succeed in cycling.
That is, I think that any sport that, you give your heart and soul to, you can do your best. And cycling is just, it's a whole other level. Thank you so much, Ismail, for coming onto the show and for giving us your time. It's been a very enlightening and fascinating discussion. And, good luck with your future competitions, and look forward to seeing you on TV at the Tour De Khunjareb.
Yes, indeed. And hopefully one day you will come and follow the race yourself. I will invite you.
We'd love to. Sportageous would
cover it live.
Yeah, more than happy to do that one day, But thanks again. And hopefully we'll sit down and talk again at some point in the future.
Sounds good. Sure will. Okie dokes. You take care. See you. Bye.